That morning, the forest held its breath. You could feel it, that stillness before something changes forever. The sun hadn't yet cleared the ridge when the first sound echoed through Cedar Hollow, the sharp crack of a rifle slicing through the hush like splintered glass. For a moment, the snow itself seemed to stop falling. Out in the valley, the light was still thin and gray, the kind that makes the pines look like silhouettes of smoke. And somewhere between those trees, Emily Warren, just 10 years old, froze mid-step on the narrow trail leading home. She was small for her age, wrapped in a blue coat that looked too big for her one mitten missing, but she didn't shiver. She just listened. The echo carried for a long time, rolling down the valley and fading into silence. Then came another sound, faint, broken something between a growl and a cry. It came again, then again, weaker each time. Emily turned toward it. Down past the alder brush and the bend of the creek, a figure was moving. Not a deer, not a person, something heavier, limping, dragging. And even from that distance, she could see the glint of metal wire tight around a paw. A bobcat. Its fur was a patchwork of tawny gold and gray, winter thick and dusted with snow. Blood spotted the white ground beneath it, bright, clean, terrible. The animal strained against the snare, but every movement only made the wire bite deeper. Emily didn't think. She simply walked toward it. Behind her, a voice called out, distant, breathless, her mother's voice. Emily, stop. But she didn't. By the time Dr. Hannah Warren reached her daughter, her heart was already pounding from the climb. She was still in her work jacket, the one she wore to the animal clinic in town, her stethoscope half buried in her pocket. The hunters who'd set the line stood nearby, rifles lowered now, their faces pale with confusion. "Ma'am, you need to keep that kid back," one of them said. "That cat's wild. It'll tear her apart." But Hannah barely heard him. Her eyes were locked on her daughter, this quiet, reserved child who rarely spoke above a whisper, standing just a few feet from a wounded predator. Emily crouched slowly, her small boots sinking into the snow. The bobcat's breathing was ragged, its ears flicked, eyes blazing with something fierce yet tired, not anger, not yet. More like fear. "It's okay," Emily said softly, her voice steady in the cold air. "You're not alone." No one taught her to speak like that, not to an animal like this. But the tone, the rhythm, the stillness, they worked. The bobcat stopped pulling at the wire. Its muscles eased just a fraction. Hannah exhaled, her training kicking in. "Okay," she said gently, moving closer. "Sweetheart, I'm right here. Don't touch him yet." She set down her field bag, pulling out a thick pair of gloves and a tranquilizer syringe. Every motion was measured calm. The hunters shifted nervously behind her, whispering. "I'll need you to back up," she said over her shoulder, her voice firm now. "Give us space." One of them hesitated. "That thing's huge." "You sure you can?" "I'm sure," Hannah said without looking up. "There's a moment in every rescue, a moment that lives between danger and mercy. You can't rush it. You just wait. You breathe. You listen." Hannah waited until the bobcat's chest slowed its trembling. She moved close enough to touch its fur, murmuring under her breath words meant more for her own courage than the animal's. The dart clicked a whisper of air, and the cat flinched once before going still. Hannah worked quickly, cutting through the wire, her gloved hands steady, though her breath came fast. Emily watched everything, every small movement, every gentle word. She didn't blink when the wire snapped loose or when her mother pressed a clean bandage to the wound. When the last of the snare came free, the bobcat's paw twitched, then relaxed completely. It wasn't gone, not yet, just surrendering to rest. They carried him back on an old canvas sled, the one Hannah used for large dogs at the clinic. Snow fell softly the entire way home, muffling the crunch of their boots. Halfway up the trail, Emily reached out not to touch, but to steady the edge of the sled. She walked in silence beside the animal, as if she already understood the gravity of what they were doing. The hunters followed at a distance, still uneasy, muttering to each other about laws and permits. But to Hannah, all that could wait. Her only thought was the bleeding paw, the slowed breathing, and the strange serenity on her daughter's face. When they reached their porch, the first thing she noticed wasn't the cat. It was the look in Emily's eyes. That same calm she'd seen only once before, the day they scattered Michael's ashes by the river. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the familiar scent of cedar shavings and disinfectant. The clinic was small, a converted mudroom off the main cabin. Shelves of gauze and salves lined one wall. An old examination lamp stood crooked in the corner. They laid the bobcat on the padded table. Hannah moved quickly, cleaning the wound, stitching the torn skin with quiet precision. Emily stayed close, her hand resting near the cat's flank, just out of reach. "What should we call him?" she asked. Hannah didn't answer right away. She was watching the rise and fall of the animal's chest, shallow but steady. "Let's not name him yet," she said. "He's wild, Em. He won't stay." But Emily smiled faintly. "Then we'll call him Bracken. It's what grows when the forest heals itself." Hannah looked at her, not sure where a 10-year-old learned to say something like that. For the next few hours, the cabin became a small world of quiet movement. Hannah cleaned, stitched, and bandaged. Emily fetched towels and hot water. Bracken slept, his breathing low and even. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the trees heavy with snow. Every so often, Hannah caught her daughter just watching the cat, not with fascination, but with recognition. It reminded her of something Michael once said years ago when they first moved to Cedar Hollow. "This place teaches you patience," he'd told her, standing beneath a sky filled with starlight. "You can't hurry a thing that's still becoming." She hadn't understood it then, but now, looking at her daughter, at this child, who so often lived in a world of her own quiet patterns, Hannah wondered if maybe Emily understood it better than anyone. There's a kind of love that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout or demand or even ask to be understood. It simply shows up, steady and spoken, like the way a mother's hand trembles while holding a needle steady, or the way a child refuses to leave the side of something fragile. That morning in that small cabin at the edge of the woods, two lives, one human, one wild, crossed paths. Not out of chance, but out of recognition. Something in them seemed to remember each other. And though Hannah would later tell reporters and wildlife officers about adrenaline, about veterinary instinct and field protocol, she would never quite find the words for what she saw in her daughter's eyes when the bobcat stirred for the first time. After sedation, it was trust, pure and complete. The kind you don't teach, the kind you're born with. By evening, the fire was low and the clinic lights dimmed. Bracken lay curled in the corner pen, a thick blanket over the straw bedding. Emily sat cross-legged, just outside the gate, humming softly to herself, a tune without melody but full of comfort. Hannah leaned against the doorframe, exhausted but oddly peaceful. She thought about calling the wildlife department, about filling out the paperwork she knew would be required, about explaining why a wild bobcat now slept 10 feet from her kitchen. But instead, she watched her daughter. Something was healing in that image, the child, the wild creature, the slow rhythm of their breathing sinking like a lullaby. Outside, snow kept falling, erasing footprints, softening every sharp thing the day had left behind. Sometimes healing doesn't come from medicine or logic. Sometimes it comes quietly from the courage of a child who steps forward when everyone else steps back, from a mother who learns that control is not the same as care, and from a wounded creature who teaches both that survival and surrender can coexist. In that moment, Hannah realized something simple, almost frightening in its truth. Sometimes love means standing back and letting nature speak first. As night settled deeper into Cedar Hollow, the storm outside faded into silence. By morning, the world would wake to new whispers, rumors, questions. Disbelief in the story of the vet's daughter and her giant bobcat would begin to spread far beyond their small valley. But for now, there was only the sound of snow melting from the eaves and the steady heartbeat of something wild learning at last that it was safe. Have you ever witnessed a moment when fear gave way to trust, when a wild thing or even a person finally let you close? If you have, you already know kindness doesn't need permission. It only needs someone brave enough to begin. Some homes are built from wood and nails. Others are built from quiet, from the steady hum of care, from the sound of breath shared between beings who need healing more than they need answers. By the time dawn touched the ridge, the forest around Cedar Hollow had settled again. Smoke drifted lazily from a dozen chimneys, and the frost on the porch rails turned to mist. Inside the Warren cabin, a small house crouched against the tree line. The air smelled faintly of pine resin, coffee, and antiseptic. On the table near the window, the bobcat Bracken lay still, a thin blanket covering his flank. A silver bowl of water sat untouched beside him. And across from him, in a wooden chair pulled too close to the heat of the stove, Emily slept with her head resting on her folded arms. Her mitten, the one she'd lost the day before, was still tucked in her pocket. Hannah stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. She whispered, "You should be in bed." Her daughter stirred but didn't open her eyes. "He's cold," she murmured. Hannah hesitated. There were a dozen reasons to move the child to restore the order of things. Home upstairs. Patient, downstairs rules. Boundaries. Protocol. But in that thin light of morning order seemed less important than the rhythm of what was happening here. A mother watching a child, keeping vigil. And something wild, wounded but alive, sleeping between them. Hannah adjusted the fire, careful not to let the wood crack too loudly. The cabin was old, built by her husband Michael's hands nearly 15 years earlier. Every beam held a memory, the smell of sawdust, the hum of his voice as he sanded the porch rails. He used to say, "You build with patience, not hammers. Rush it, and the forest will push it back down." That morning, Hannah found herself repeating the line in her head. Bracken's chest rose and fell, slow, uneven, but strong. His paws twitched occasionally, like he was dreaming of running again. Emily woke quietly and sat up, her hair sticking to her cheek. She didn't say good morning. She simply looked toward the animal. "His eyes moved while you were sleeping," Hannah told her. Emily smiled faintly. "He knows we're here." For the next few days, life at the edge of the woods rearranged itself around Bracken's recovery. The dining table became a clinic table. The hum of the refrigerator was replaced by the gentle ticking of the heart monitor Hannah brought home from the clinic. Outside, the mail piled up in the box. Neighbors called, curious, concerned, sometimes intrusive, but Hannah ignored most of them. She spent her days changing bandages, checking vitals, and logging notes in her old field journal. Emily spent hers sitting near the pen, sketching quietly on loose sheets of printer paper. She drew the forest the way she saw it, alive and aware, with eyes in the bark and whispers in the wind. And always in the corner of each page, a figure, a large golden-eyed cat beside a small girl in a blue coat. When Hannah asked about it one evening, Emily shrugged. "He's part of it," she said simply. "The forest talks differently when he's here." Hannah didn't know what to say to that. But later, as she washed her hands at the sink, she thought of how still the woods had felt since Bracken came. No crows calling, no distant howls, just the slow return of peace. Maybe the child was right. Maybe the forest did talk differently now. On the fourth night, a storm rolled down from the Cascades, heavy wet snow that blanketed the valley in white silence. Hannah was closing up the clinic room when she heard the softest sound, not from Bracken, but from Emily. Her daughter was sitting by the pen again, whispering something. Hannah paused in the doorway, listening. It wasn't English. It wasn't even words, really. Just a rhythm. Soft, measured, almost like the way Hannah used to hum to Emily when she was little and frightened of thunder. Bracken's tail flicked once. His ears twitched toward the sound. Hannah felt something shift inside her. That strange mix of awe and uncertainty that motherhood brings when your child does something you can't explain, but somehow feels right. When she finally spoke, her voice came out softer than she intended. "You think he understands you?" Emily looked up, blinking slowly. "I don't have to think," she said. "He already does." Later that night, after Emily had gone to bed, Hannah lingered by the pen. Bracken was sleeping deeply now, his breathing even. She studied him the way scientists study stars, equal parts reverence and caution. Up close, he was magnificent. The broad face, the tufted ears, the fur that shimmered between gray and gold, depending on the light. But it wasn't his size that held her. It was the calm, the absence of aggression, the trust forming where there should have been fear. She remembered the last time she'd seen trust like that, the moment Michael had handed her a newborn Emily, tiny and wailing, and whispered, "You'll know what to do. Just listen." Listening. She'd forgotten what that felt like. For years, her life had been noise, deadlines, appointments, forms, grief. But now, in the hush of this small room, with snow drifting past the windows and a wild animal breathing steadily beside her, Hannah felt something settle. It wasn't relief. It was recognition. Sometimes love doesn't announce itself with grand gestures. It arrives quietly in the sound of a kettle boiling, while someone sleeps in the way a mother keeps a nightlight burning long after her child stops asking. In the slow rhythm of caring for something that may never say thank you. Hannah didn't call the wildlife department that week. She told herself it was because Bracken wasn't stable yet, that the sedation had to wear off before she could move him safely. But deep down, she knew there was another reason. She wasn't ready to let go. Not of the cat, not of the stillness, not of the version of her daughter that had begun to emerge in his presence. The Emily she saw now was different. Still quiet, yes, but anchored, more awake. When she spoke, her voice had weight, not volume, but meaning. And that meant more to Hannah than any report she'd ever written, any surgery she'd ever completed. Motherhood, she realized, wasn't about control. It wasn't about perfect routines or protecting a child from every bruise the world might offer. It was about learning to trust the unknown, to let life unfold even when it scares you. Looking at Bracken, Hannah saw a mirror she hadn't expected, a creature of instinct and grace, carrying both danger and beauty in the same heartbeat. And in that reflection, she saw herself a woman learning slowly that care doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it means faith. Outside, the storm deepened. The trees bowed under the weight of snow, creaking like old voices. Inside, the lamp on the counter flickered once, twice, then steadied. Emily stirred in her sleep upstairs. Hannah smiled faintly, brushing her hand along the wooden door frame her husband had built. She could almost hear his voice again. You build with patience. Maybe this all of it was what he meant. By the end of that week, the bobcat's wound had closed, and the forest seemed to lean closer around their little house. But not everyone in Cedar Hollow shared their peace. At the diner, people began to talk. At the clinic, whispers turned into warnings. And soon Hannah would learn that kindness, especially towards something wild, often comes with a price. The line between fear and faith was about to be tested, not just in her home, but across the whole valley. Have you ever found yourself caring for something you didn't understand? A stray animal, a fragile soul, or even your own heart after loss, if so? You already know love doesn't always look safe at first. But given time and patience, it builds its own kind of shelter, quiet, steady, and true. Small towns have long memories. They can keep your kindness alive for years, or turn your silence into rumor before the day is done. By the time February melted into early spring, Cedar Hollow began to stir again. Snow receded from the fields, roads turned soft and muddy, and the first trill of songbirds returned to the trees. The thaw was a relief for most, except for the Warrens. Inside their cabin, the season changed quietly. Bracken's wound had healed into a faint scar beneath his fur. He moved with new strength, now pacing near the wide windows, eyes tracking the wind. And though Hannah kept him in the reinforced pen behind the house, his presence filled every corner. The air, the conversation, even the way Emily's drawings had shifted. She no longer drew the forest as a backdrop. She drew it as home. At first it was peaceful, but in small towns, peace often stirs questions, and questions, when left unanswered, turn into whispers. It began at Marty's diner, where the morning crowd gathered for pancakes and local news. The coffee was strong, the gossip stronger. "You hear about that vet up the ridge?" someone asked, lowering his voice, though not enough to keep it from traveling. "The one with the wild cat?" Across the counter, another man nodded. "My nephew saw it. Says it's no cat. Says it's near the size of a mountain lion." "That can't be right," the waitress said, stacking plates. "You mean that lady Hannah Warren? She's got a little girl." "Exactly my point." The men leaned closer, words low but sharp. Dangerous, reckless, illegal. By lunchtime, the talk had spread from the diner to the school, from the school to the post office, until even those who'd never met Hannah felt they had something to say about her. For years, the Warrens had been part of Cedar Hollow's quiet rhythm. Hannah cared for people's pets, treated farm animals in the dead of night, and drove through blizzards to deliver medicine. She was known respected the sort of person who'd show up on your porch when your old dog went missing. But now, she was the woman keeping a bobcat in her house. Rumors grew with each retelling the creature was wild-born. It was sick. It had attacked someone. It wasn't even a bobcat at all. And in the middle of it all stood Emily. Quiet, steady, unbothered by the noise, but never untouched by it. At school, she'd overhear children whispering in the hallways, "That's the girl with the monster cat. My dad says they're breaking the law." Emily didn't argue. She simply turned away as if the words floated past her without sticking. But at home, when she thought no one was looking, she'd press her hand against Bracken's flank, that quiet act of reassurance between two beings who understood what it meant to be misunderstood. One afternoon, Sheriff Tom Bennett stopped by the clinic. He'd known Hannah since high school, had even brought her stray dogs once or twice. But that day, his tone was different. "People are talking, Hannah." He began, standing awkwardly near the door. "You know how it gets. They say you've got a wild bobcat up here. Is that true?" Hannah set down her clipboard. "You mean the injured animal I rescued?" "Yes. He's healing. He'll be released when it's safe." The sheriff rubbed his chin. "You sure that's legal? Folks are nervous. They've been losing chickens. Couple hunters think they've seen tracks bigger than normal." She met his gaze calmly. "I've checked the perimeter every morning. Bracken hasn't left his enclosure. You know I wouldn't risk the town's safety." Tom nodded slowly. He believed her, but belief doesn't quite a crowd. "Just be careful," he said. "Fear spreads faster than fact." When he left, Hannah stood for a long time watching the dust settle where his truck had been. She wasn't angry, not exactly. She understood small towns, their loyalty, their fragility. Still, it stung to feel the edge of their doubt. That evening, Emily sat on the porch steps, sketchpad balanced on her knees. Bracken was behind the mesh enclosure, eyes half closed as he soaked in the late sun. "Why are they scared?" she asked softly. Hannah joined her, sitting down with a sigh. "Because people don't always understand what's different," she said. "And when they don't understand something, they fill the gaps with fear." Emily thought about that for a moment. "But he's not bad." "No," Hannah said. "He's not." "Then why do they talk like he is?" Hannah smiled sadly. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, it's easier to be afraid than to be curious." Emily looked back toward the forest, quiet for a while. Then she whispered almost to herself, "Maybe they just forgot how to listen." There are moments in every parent's life when they realize they can't shield their child from the world's noise, only teach them how to stay kind inside it. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Hannah stood at the kitchen sink, staring through the frost-blurred window toward the pen outside. The moonlight caught Bracken's eyes, two soft embers watching back through the dark. She thought about the word dangerous, how easily it had rolled off people's tongues. Yet there, behind the fence, the creature she'd saved simply lay in the straw, breathing steady and unthreatening. Hannah's heart ached with something complicated: pride, worry, love. She wanted to protect Emily from the cruelty of misunderstanding, but she also knew that some lessons had to unfold naturally. Maybe she thought this was how empathy was built, not in comfort, but in contrast. A town is like a mirror. It reflects not just who we are, but what we choose to see in one another. Some see threat, others see beauty. Some build fences, others open gates. And in that quiet cabin at the edge of the woods, Hannah began to realize that what she and Emily were building wasn't just a recovery space for a bobcat. It was a living test of what faith looks like in motion. Faith not in miracles, but in understanding. In the belief that kindness doesn't always need approval to be right. There was an older truth here too, one Hannah could feel even if she couldn't name it yet. The line between wild and human, between what we fear and what we love, is much thinner than anyone wants to admit. The whispers didn't stop. They grew louder until one morning Hannah received an envelope in the mail stamped with the state's Wildlife Division seal. It wasn't a complaint, not yet. It was a request for documentation. DNA samples, veterinary records, proof of containment. She held the paper in her hands and felt the weight of it. The world was stepping in now, asking for answers to a question she barely knew how to explain. Outside, Emily was feeding Bracken through the gate, laughing softly as he pawed at the bowl. Hannah smiled at the sound small, ordinary, and precious even as she realized how fragile peace could be. Soon, science would enter the story, and with it, a truth no one in Cedar Hollow, not even Hannah herself, was ready for. Have you ever watched a rumor grow, seen it twist something good into something strange, just because people didn't understand it? If you have, you know that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay kind anyway, and let time tell the real story. Sometimes the answers we seek don't quiet the noise, they deepen it. Truth, like nature, has its own wild rhythm, and it rarely stops where we expect it to. A week after the letter arrived, the forest around Cedar Hollow stood half awake in early spring. Snowmelt trickled down from the ridges, carving thin streams through the frozen soil. The air smelled of damp earth and pine needles, the scent of things returning to life. Inside the Warren cabin, the kettle hissed softly. Emily sat by the window, tracing tiny patterns into the fogged glass with her finger. Outside, Bracken watched her from his enclosure, head tilted as if mirroring her small movements. Hannah leaned over the kitchen table, reading the letter again, the one stamped with the emblem of the Oregon Wildlife Division. Her stomach tightened each time her eyes reached the words, verification of species origin. They wanted proof, a DNA report. It wasn't unreasonable. A bobcat that size held in a private home would raise questions anywhere. But Hannah felt an unease that went beyond the law. It wasn't the test itself, it was the knowing that once something goes under a microscope, mystery doesn't always survive. Still, she made the call. The next day, Hannah packed a small cooler and drove into town. At Oregon State University, the Wildlife Genetics Lab sat at the edge of campus. Low brick buildings surrounded by fields of tall grass and the smell of formalin from the research wing. She'd known Dr. Tu, Elena Moore, for years, a respected colleague and friend. Elena had helped her identify hybrid coyotes once, back when things were simpler. This time, when Hannah walked into her office, she could feel the shift. Elena looked up from her computer, smiled, but there was curiosity in her eyes, that kind of professional interest that borders on concern. "So this is the mystery cat," she said, accepting the small vial of blood Hannah handed her. "You think it's a bobcat?" "I'm sure of it," Hannah replied, though her voice sounded less certain than she meant it to. Elena nodded thoughtfully, labeling the sample. "Well, let's see what science says." Hannah smiled faintly. Science always has something to say. Elena's tone softened, and sometimes it surprises both of us. For 2 weeks, life returned to a cautious rhythm. Bracken's strength improved. He began pacing less and resting more. Emily read to him from her storybooks, fairy tales about forests and loyalty and kindness, her voice a whisper beneath the rustle of wind. Every evening, Hannah stood by the porch railing, the envelope from the state tucked beneath a stack of unpaid bills. She'd look out at the enclosure, watching her daughter and the bobcat move together in a strange, seamless quiet. It was peaceful, but it was also borrowed time. When the phone finally rang, Hannah answered before the second ring. Dr. Warren Elena's voice came through, gentle but measured. "I finished the analysis." Hannah drove to the lab that same afternoon. She could tell something was off the moment she walked in. Elena's usual calm had shifted into that uneasy excitement scientists get when discovery bumps against disbelief. "I ran it 3 times, she said, motioning Hannah toward the monitor. "The results are consistent. On the screen, lines of code and color markers glowed against black." "Elena, plain English?" Hannah said quietly. Elena exhaled. "It's not just a bobcat. It's mostly bobcat, about 88%. But there's something else here. Genetic markers that don't match anything in our modern databases." Hannah frowned. "Hybridization." "Yes, but not the usual kind. These sequences resemble an ancient subspecies, Lynx rufus gigas, thought to have gone extinct thousands of years ago. And there are fragments that, well, we can't trace. They don't belong to any known feline lineage." The words hung between them like mist. "I don't understand," Hannah said. Elena smiled faintly. "Neither do I. But if these results are accurate, This animal carries genetic memory far older than the forests we're standing in." She paused. "You found something extraordinary, Hannah." Hannah shook her head slowly. "I wasn't trying to find anything. I was trying to help a wounded cat." Elena leaned back. Sometimes nature chooses its own storytellers. That night, Hannah sat in her truck outside the house long after the engine went quiet. Through the windshield, she could see the glow of Emily's flashlight by Bracken's pen. The child was sketching again, pages fluttering in the wind, a little pool of light in the darkness. Extraordinary. The word lingered like a weight she didn't want to hold. She thought of the hunters of the Sheriff of the Eyes that would see not wonder, but threat. And she thought of Emily, that small, still soul whose calm had changed the creature's wild heart. Was this connection something science could measure? Or was it something that lived outside its reach in the quiet space between fear and faith? There's a kind of knowing that doesn't come from tests or data. It comes from presence, from sitting beside something fragile and watching it trust you anyway. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Hannah took the printed DNA report and laid it on the kitchen table. The numbers and Latin names meant little beside the memory of her daughter's hand resting on the bobcat's fur. Science had given her an answer, but what it hadn't given her was peace. She remembered Michael again, how he used to say, "The forest doesn't ask us to understand it. It just asks us to belong to it." Maybe that was what frightened people most, belonging to something bigger than themselves. The next morning, Hannah shared the results with Emily. "So he's special," the girl said matter-of-factly, chewing the end of her pencil. "Yes," Hannah said softly. "Very special." Emily nodded, eyes bright. "I knew it." How Emily looked out the window toward the pen. "Because when he looks at me, it's like he remembers me from before I was born." Hannah felt her chest tighten. "What do you mean?" But Emily just shrugged, returning to her drawing. "It's not scary. It's just true." Hannah said nothing more. Some truths, she realized, are meant to be held, not questioned. For most of her career, Hannah had trusted facts. She'd built her life around measurable things: pulse temperature, blood count, cause-cure. But standing in that kitchen, she began to see the world as her daughter did, layered, connected, alive in ways that charts could never capture. Maybe science and spirit weren't opposites after all. Maybe they were two languages describing the same story. One spoke in data, the other in wonder. And maybe if she could learn to listen to both, she'd finally understand what was happening here. The DNA mystery wasn't about the animal alone. It was about everything the test couldn't name: the invisible thread that linked a wounded bobcat, a quiet child, and a mother learning to let go of certainty. A few days later, a thick envelope arrived from the Wildlife Division requesting an in-person review of the findings. The word containment appeared 3 times. Hannah folded the letter carefully, her fingers trembling. Outside, the first buds had opened on the dogwood trees. Bracken was stronger now, but restless, pacing the pen with a rhythm that made her uneasy. The world was about to come looking for proof, and the next knock on her door wouldn't bring a friend with gentle curiosity. It would bring strangers with cameras, forms, and opinions. The piece of Cedar Hollow was slipping away. Have you ever found an answer that only led to more questions? One that asked you to look at life and yourself a little differently? If so, you already know sometimes truth doesn't end the story. It deepens it and calls you to listen quietly to what it's trying to teach. Sometimes what we call new has simply been waiting, buried under time, carried quietly through blood and memory, until someone comes along, willing to listen. The morning Hannah decided to look for answers, the valley lay beneath a quilt of fog. The pines stood still, heavy with moisture, and the air smelled of thawing soil, that rich, earthy scent of things about to grow again. Bracken was restless. He paced the edge of his pen muscles, rippling under his fur. Every few moments, he'd stop and stare into the woods, as if hearing a sound too deep for human ears. Emily noticed it too. "He's waiting," she said softly. "For what?" Hannah asked. Emily's small shoulders lifted. "Something that remembers him." Hannah didn't ask more. She'd learned by now that Emily's words often carried more truth than reason. But that morning, as she watched the child press her hand to the glass and the bobcat pause on the other side, Hannah felt a question rise in her chest, one she could no longer ignore. Who or what was Bracken really? The lab results had answered nothing. If anything, they had only deepened the mystery. Ancient DNA, extinct species fragments that didn't match any known feline. It all sounded impossible. And yet here he was alive, tangible, breathing. But it wasn't just science that made Hannah uneasy. It was the way the story seemed older than both of them, as though the animal had carried something forward, something forgotten. So that afternoon she drove into town to see Elder Joseph Redleaf, a man the locals still turned to when the land itself seemed to hold a question. He lived on the western edge of Cedar Hollow, near the riverbank where the pines gave way to wide meadows. His cabin looked like it had grown straight out of the soil logs, darkened by rain smoke curling softly from the chimney. When Hannah arrived, Joseph was sitting outside carving a piece of cedar. He looked up and smiled. "It's been a long time since I've seen you, Dr. Warren," he said. "Too long," she replied. "I need your help with something." He nodded once, as if he'd been expecting her. Inside the cabin was quiet, warm, and filled with the scent of sage and wood smoke. Hannah explained everything: the rescue, the DNA test, Emily's connection, the rumors. She spoke quickly at first, her voice trained to deliver facts. But as the story went on, her tone softened, her hands tightening around the cup of tea Joseph had given her. When she finished, he sat back silent for a long time. The only sound was the soft pop of the fire. "Finally," he said, "when I was a boy, my grandmother used to tell stories about the spirit lynx. She said they were guardians, not of land, but of balance. They appeared when the line between the human and the wild grew thin." Hannah frowned gently. "You think Bracken is one of them?" Joseph smiled faintly. "I think the forest remembers its promises. You see, Dr. Warren, our people believe that certain children were born under the mark of the wild, marked not by choice, but by kinship. They could walk between worlds, speak to what most only feared." He gestured toward her wrist. "Your daughter. She carries such a mark." Hannah hesitated. "Since birth. A faint paw print just here." He nodded. "The wolf's embrace, we call it. It is not a curse. It is a calling." She sat in silence, trying to absorb the words. But how, she asked finally. "How does any of that connect to the DNA?" Joseph chuckled softly. "You scientists, you always want the map before you take the walk. Maybe both paths lead to the same place. One uses a microscope, the other memory." There was no argument to make against wisdom like that. It wasn't logic, it was lived truth, worn smooth by generations. For the first time in months, Hannah allowed herself to sit without thinking, without analyzing. She listened to the crackle of the fire, the faint rhythm of Joseph's breath, and the wind brushing through the pine needles outside. She thought of her husband, of how he used to say that nature had its own pulse. If you're quiet enough, he'd told her, once you can feel it under your feet. Maybe what she was feeling now wasn't confusion. Maybe it was that pulse calling her to stop searching for control and start listening for connection. She left Joseph's cabin with more questions than answers, but her heart was lighter, her steps slower, her thoughts quieter. That evening, the sun broke through the fog in long golden beams. The forest glowed wet and alive. Emily was waiting on the porch, sketch pad open. "Did you find out?" she asked. Hannah smiled, sitting beside her. "I found stories," she said. "Old ones." Emily tilted her head. "Stories are where truth hides." Hannah studied her daughter's face, that calm, unshaken gaze that never looked lost, only deep in thought. "How did you get so wise?" Emily shrugged. "Maybe I just listen better." In her sketchbook, a new drawing took shape: a bobcat standing beside a girl, and behind them, faint outlines of something older, symbols woven through the trees. Threads of light connecting stars. Branches, hearts. When Hannah asked what it was, Emily said, "It's how the wild remembers love." That night, Hannah sat on the porch long after Emily went to bed. The forest was full of sound: wind owls, the faraway call of coyotes. But underneath it all, there was something quieter. Not silence exactly, but presence. A rhythm. She realized then that every living thing, human, animal, plant, carries a thread that stretches backward, connecting us to stories we don't even remember telling. Maybe that's what ancestry truly is, not names in a book or lines on a chart, but the continuation of care. A mother teaching her daughter to listen. A creature choosing trust over fear. A community rediscovering its compassion. The threads of the past aren't just history. They're bridges linking what was, what is, and what could still heal. And perhaps Bracken wasn't here to be studied or contained. Maybe he was here to remind them that connection itself is sacred, that kindness, even when misunderstood, is an inheritance worth protecting. As the moon rose over the valley, Hannah whispered a promise not to the forest, not even to herself, but to whatever invisible pattern had brought them all together. She would protect this bond, no matter what it cost. But the world beyond Cedar Hollow was already stirring. A video from a passing hiker had begun spreading online, footage of a young girl kneeling beside a giant bobcat, her small hand resting against its paw. By morning, reporters would be calling. By afternoon, strangers would be driving up the narrow road toward the Warren house. And what had once been a story about healing was about to become a headline. Have you ever uncovered a story from your family or your past that made you see yourself differently, not as separate, but connected? If you have, you already know we don't just carry history. We continue it every time we choose compassion over fear and understanding over doubt. In a small town, news travels on whispers. But in the age of screens, it doesn't whisper anymore, it roars. It began with a single video, just 40 seconds long. A passing hiker out early to photograph elk tracks caught sight of the Warren property from the ridge above Cedar Hollow. Through the trees, his camera lens found a girl kneeling by a large bobcat, her small hand resting lightly on its paw. In the video, the cat's head, tilted ears twitching in quiet recognition. A soft purr, deep and low, rolled through the still air. The hiker uploaded the clip that evening, thinking nothing of it. He titled it simply, "Wild Bobcat Bonds with Girl in Oregon." By dawn, it had 1 million views. By noon, it had 10. The phone started ringing before breakfast. First, it was local reporters, then regional news outlets. And by mid-afternoon, the calls were coming from places Hannah had never been, New York, London, Tokyo. The messages were all the same. Can we film with your daughter? Is the animal really a bobcat? Are you aware of state wildlife laws? At first, Hannah didn't answer. She told herself it would blow over. People always moved on to the next headline. But this was different. Something about the story, the child, the animal, the mystery had caught the world's attention, and like wildfire, attention burned fast. Within days, Cedar Hollow changed. Cars lined the old highway leading into town. Drones hummed faintly above the trees. The small grocery store that once stocked milk and coffee now sells postcards printed with screenshots from the viral clip. And outside the Warren property, people gathered, some carrying cameras, some carrying questions, and a few carrying signs. Set the wild free. Protect the child. Truth lives in the forest. The peace that had once wrapped their home like a blanket was gone. Inside, Hannah tried to keep things normal. Breakfast at 8 clinic appointments in town, quiet hours after dinner. But even the walls felt thinner now. Every sound outside set her heart racing. Emily, meanwhile, seemed untouched by it all. She still fed Bracken every morning, still spoke to him in that soft tone that only he understood. But when she glanced toward the road and saw the cameras through the trees, she'd draw the curtains without a word. She wasn't afraid. She was protective. One afternoon, Sheriff Tom Bennett pulled into the driveway. His truck, once a welcome sight, now made Hannah's stomach tighten. He stepped out, holding a folded notice. "You've been served," he said gently. "Wildlife Division's requesting immediate inspection. They're sending an officer from Salem tomorrow." Hannah nodded, her throat dry. And if they decide he's too dangerous, Tom didn't answer right away. He just looked past her toward the pen where Bracken lay stretched in the sunlight, calm and unbothered. "They'll do what they think is right," he said quietly. "But you should know half this town's on your side." Her eyes widened. "Half?" He smiled faintly. The other half's still deciding. That night, Hannah couldn't sleep. The sound of the forest, once comforting, felt crowded now, full of unseen eyes. She sat at the torn stacks of letters spread out before her. Some were kind handwritten notes from strangers thanking her for showing the good left in people. Others were harsh, accusing her of endangering a child of playing God with nature. She read every one, then folded them one by one into a shoebox she kept under the counter, not because she agreed, but because she wanted to remember what the world looked like when people forgot how to be gentle. Fame doesn't always feel like praise. Sometimes it feels like exposure, like someone taking something sacred and holding it too close to the light. For Hannah, the hardest part wasn't the noise. It was the loss of quiet. The small, ordinary moments, the morning coffee, the sound of pencil on paper. The soft exchange between her daughter and the creature they'd saved were drowned out by the world's fascination. And yet underneath the chaos, something steady remained. Each night, when the lights of the reporters' vans dimmed and the voices faded, Emily would sneak outside with a lantern. She'd sit by the pen, her knees drawn to her chest, humming softly. From her bedroom window, Hannah would watch her daughter and the wildcat, framed by moonlight and fence wire. It reminded her of the old stories Joseph had told her of guardians of threads that connect spirit and soil, child and creature. And she began to understand maybe some stories are meant to be witnessed, not owned. The next morning, the Wildlife Division officer arrived, Mark Dalton, a man with years in field enforcement and a reputation for fairness. He spent hours at the property, measuring the enclosure, checking Hannah's documentation, and observing Bracken's behavior. When he finished, he pulled off his gloves and said quietly, "He's remarkable." Hannah studied his face. "Will they take him?" "I'll make my report," he said carefully. "But off the record, if this animal were truly wild, you'd have scars by now. He's bonded, not captured. There's a difference." She exhaled the first real breath she'd taken in days. Before leaving, he paused by the gate. Emily was there, sketching Bracken in the morning light. Dalton watched for a moment, then nodded respectfully. "Keep doing what you're doing," he said. "Just be ready. The world doesn't always understand peace when it sees it." By evening, the town's mood began to shift. The diner conversations softened. People who'd once whispered began bringing casseroles, old blankets, and donations for fencing material. And among them was one face Hannah didn't expect: Henry Collins, one of the hunters who'd been there the day she first found Bracken in the snare. He stood awkwardly on the porch, hat in hand. "I came to help with the repairs," he said. "Didn't sit right with me what folks been saying." Hannah hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." While they worked, Henry shared something she hadn't known: that he'd gone back to the forest that day, weeks after the rescue, and found the old snare lines empty, untouched, as if the land itself had closed over them. "I reckon the woods wanted him here," he said quietly. "And maybe the girl too." It's strange how redemption often shows up quietly, wearing work gloves instead of apologies. That night, after everyone left, Hannah stood by the pen as the first stars blinked awake. The chaos outside had eased, at least for now. She reached through the mesh, brushing her fingers against Bracken's fur. He turned his head slightly, pressing closer. "You're safe," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was reassuring, more him or herself. The world will always try to define what it doesn't understand, to name it, claim it, or fear it. But Hannah had begun to see something deeper. Maybe what she and Emily had found wasn't about ownership or protection at all. Maybe it was about coexistence, about learning that kindness, even when met with misunderstanding, is never wasted. Bracken wasn't just an animal healed by human care. He was a mirror showing what humanity still could be when it stopped trying to conquer and started trying to connect. Days later, a letter arrived, not from the state, not from a reporter, but from Dr. Elena Moore. She'd been reanalyzing the DNA, comparing the results with ancient genetic archives. Her findings, she wrote, defy classification. She asked Hannah to return to the university to talk not about legality or headlines, but about the possibility that Bracken's lineage might hold a clue to something even older than biology itself. As Hannah read the letter aloud, Emily leaned closer, her eyes wide. "Maybe they'll finally listen," she said. Hannah smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Maybe we all will." The world's attention had begun as noise, but maybe, just maybe, it was turning into curiosity. Have you ever shared something beautiful with the world? only to watch it get misunderstood, then slowly, tenderly, find its way back to being seen for what it truly was. If you have, you know, truth always finds its voice. It just needs time and someone brave enough to keep listening. Not every kind of healing happens in hospitals. Some begin in silence, where wind meets fire and love remembers what the heart forgot to say. The first sign that something was wrong came quietly. Bracken had stopped eating. For days he ignored his meals, the venison, the broth, even the bits of roasted chicken Emily used to sneak from her plate. He moved more slowly now, resting longer beneath the shade of the pines. At first, Hannah thought it was the stress, the crowds, the cameras, the endless questions. But by the end of the week, his breathing had changed. It came shallow, strained, like the forest air itself had grown too heavy to carry. Then Emily began to fade too. It started with small things, forgetting her breakfast, losing interest in drawing, sleeping through the mornings. Her skin turned pale, her voice softer. One night, Hannah found her curled up on the floor by the pen, her hand pressed against the glass. "He's sick," Emily whispered. "I can feel it." Hannah tried to smile. "He'll get better, sweetheart." But inside something broke, that old sharp fear every parent knows too well. What if I can't fix this? The next morning, Hannah called Dr. 2, Elena Moore, who arranged for tests, blood work for both Emily and Bracken. The results came back faster than she expected, and they carried words no mother ever wants to hear. Bracken's organs were failing, a condition Elena couldn't explain, one that looked like something ancient had reawakened inside his blood. And Emily, her own results mirrored his. Their cells, their rhythms, even their declining vitals, all in tandem like two songs playing the same melody across different worlds. Elena was the first to say it out loud. Whatever connects them, it's not just emotional, it's biological. But even as Hannah tried to understand the science, she knew logic could only take her so far. The answer they needed didn't live in a lab. It lived somewhere older, somewhere in the hush of pine needles and wind. So she called Elder Joseph Redleaf. He didn't sound surprised when she told him what was happening. "I felt it," he said simply. "The forest is restless. It's time." That evening, Joseph arrived at the Warren cabin. He brought no medicine, no instruments, only a bundle of sage, a carved cedar bowl, and a small pouch of river stones worn smooth by time. "The ceremony is not about curing," he said gently. "It's about remembering." They built a small fire at the clearing behind the house where the wind could move freely through the pines. The sky was deep gray, heavy with clouds that refused to break. Emily sat beside Bracken, wrapped in her old blue coat, her face pale but calm. Hannah knelt next to her, unsure what to do with her hands, a woman of science standing at the edge of faith. Joseph placed the cedar bowl between them and began sprinkling the herbs into the flames. The air filled with the scent of smoke and earth, sharp and familiar. "This is not magic," he said softly. "This is memory." He touched his hand to Emily's wrist, right where the faint paw-shaped birthmark still glowed under her skin. Then he touched Bracken's chest just above the steady, struggling heartbeat. "Two lives," he murmured. "Two breaths, one thread." The wind rose suddenly, carrying his words through the trees. Hannah closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of it fill her. In that moment, the world felt suspended. Not gone, not present, just paused. The fire flickered between them, casting their faces in gold and shadow. Emily's fingers brushed against Bracken's fur, and he didn't flinch. His breathing steadied, slow and deliberate, as if drawing strength from the warmth beside him. Hannah wanted to believe it was the ceremony, or Joseph's prayer, or something ancient stirring. But part of her knew it was something simpler, the quiet power of love, unguarded and unconditional. She thought of Michael, of how he used to hold her hand when storms rolled in, saying, "Don't fight the wind, Han. It knows where it's going." She had spent years fighting for control, for answers, for safety. But now, watching her daughter and the wild creature she loved, Hannah understood that some things are healed not by holding tighter, but by letting go. As the fire burned lower, Joseph began to sing, not loudly, but with a voice that carried weight, like the hum of the earth beneath their feet. The song had no clear melody, no words she recognized, yet it felt familiar. Emily's lips moved in rhythm, with the sound whispering something Hannah couldn't hear. The air shimmered faintly, a soft current swirling through the clearing. For a moment, just a heartbeat, Hannah swore she saw light connecting the child's hand and the bobcat's chest. Not bright or blinding, just warm, the color of dawn through fog. Then the wind shifted. The fire dipped low, and in the hush that followed, everything stilled Bracken's breath. Emily's trembling, even Hannah's fear. The ceremony ended without fanfare. No miracles, no thunder, just silence. Joseph poured water over the ashes and spoke softly. Now the earth will remember what they gave each other. Later, after Joseph had gone, Hannah tucked Emily into bed. The child was already asleep, her breathing, even her hand, still faintly warm from where she'd touched the bobcat. Outside, Bracken lay beneath the old pine tree, his head resting on the cool ground, his eyes half closed. Hannah sat on the porch and listened. She didn't know whether the ceremony had changed anything tangible, but she felt something had shifted in her, in the house, in the space between the trees. It wasn't about belief or proof. It was about surrender. About realizing that healing doesn't always mean returning to what was. Sometimes it means becoming something new. For years, Hannah had trusted only what she could measure. But now, she understood that the unseen, the gentle, the sacred, the unprovable might hold just as much truth. The wind moved through the forest again, gentle this time, almost kind. It carried the scent of cedar, the whisper of the fire's last smoke, and something else, a quiet promise. When morning came, sunlight spilled across the porch like honey. Hannah stepped outside expecting the same weariness, the same ache of worry. Instead, she found Bracken standing weak but upright, his gaze steady and calm. Emily appeared moments later, rubbing her eyes. "He's better," she said simply, and somehow Hannah believed her. They didn't celebrate, didn't call anyone. They just sat together, mother, daughter, and creature breathing in the morning, as if the whole world had taken one collective sigh of relief. For the first time in months, the silence felt safe again. That day, Hannah wrote in her journal, not medical notes or genetic observations, but something simpler. Maybe science describes the body, but love describes the soul. Maybe both are needed to keep life whole. She closed the book, knowing she'd remember those words long after the pages faded, because deep down she understood what the ceremony had truly done. It hadn't erased sickness or defied death. It had aligned hearts, human and wild, back to the rhythm of something ancient and kind. But even peace has a fragile heartbeat. That night a storm gathered over the ridge, the kind that makes the forest hum low and alive. Lightning flickered across the horizon and thunder rolled through the valley. Emily stood by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. "It's not done yet," she whispered. Hannah didn't ask what she meant. She had learned to trust that tone in her daughter's voice, the one that carried truth like wind carries seed. Some endings aren't really endings at all. They're thresholds, the soft edge of something beginning again. And what began that night would change not just their family, but the way the world saw the bond between people in the wild. Have you ever stood in the middle of a moment that felt sacred, not because it was loud or grand, but because it was honest? If you have, you already know healing rarely looks like miracles. More often it looks like love, steady, quiet, and strong enough to hold through any storm. Every bridge we build between people, between hearts, between worlds, leaves something behind. Not the weight of what was lost, but the light of what was learned to endure. Spring returned slowly to Cedar Hollow that year. The heavy snows melted into rivers that carried pine needles and sunlight down into the valley. And the forest seemed to breathe again. The noise of the outside world, the reporters, the debates, the noise that had once swallowed their peace faded like a distant dream. What remained was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from absence, but the kind that comes from healing. Bracken was still there. He moved differently now, slower, wiser, his once coarse fur brushed with gray around the muzzle. But his eyes, those golden, steady eyes, still held that deep calm that had first silenced fear in a child's heart. And Emily, she was growing. Her voice, once hesitant, now carried confidence. She spoke to groups of visitors who came from neighboring towns to learn about her story, about kindness, connection, and the wild's gentle side. At first, Hannah had hesitated to open their world to others again. But when she saw her daughter explaining to a group of children how to recognize bobcat tracks in the mud, or how to move quietly through the forest without disturbing nests, she realized that the world wasn't intruding anymore. It was learning. The property had changed too. What was once a private yard had grown into something new. The Bridge Wildlife Center, a small sanctuary for healing animals and children alike. It began with bracken, but soon other creatures arrived, a fox rescued from a roadside ditch, a pair of orphaned fawns, and even an injured hawk that now perched proudly on the old fence post. The center's motto was simple. To care for the wild, we must first remember we belong to it. People often came expecting a miracle, a story of magic, of a girl who tamed a wild thing. But that wasn't what Emily or Hannah ever wanted to tell. When visitors asked how it all began, Emily would point to bracken resting beneath the pines and say softly, "He wasn't mine. He just trusted me long enough to find his way again." And those who listened closely could feel the truth beneath those words. The connection wasn't ownership, it was understanding. As months passed, bracken's health stabilized. The strange illness that once mirrored Emily's faded with time. Perhaps it was the medicine. Perhaps it was the ceremony in the wind. Perhaps it was simply love learning how to rest. No one ever knew for sure, and that was okay. Not every mystery asks to be solved. Some are meant to be honored. Dr. Elena Moore visited often. She and Hannah would spend long evenings at the picnic table reviewing new research, sketching possibilities about genetic memory and ancient species. But sometimes when the conversation grew too clinical, they'd stop mid-sentence and simply watch Emily laughing with the other children, her voice blending with the rustle of the trees. Science could explain the patterns, but not the peace. One quiet evening just before sunset, Emily stood with her sketchbook by bracken's enclosure. The air was cool, fragrant with pine and thawed earth. Bracken lifted his head, his gaze following the flight of a hawk disappearing into the gold light. Emily turned a page and began to draw. Not the animal this time, but something different. A child and a cat, standing side by side, their reflections merging into a single thread of light that reached upward toward a sun just breaking through clouds. When Hannah came outside, she paused behind her daughter, smiling. "What's that one called?" she asked. Emily didn't look up. "The bridge," she said simply. "It's what he built for us." Hannah crouched beside her. "A bridge to where? To everything we forgot to love." Hannah didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat caught in that way it does when words aren't big enough to carry what you feel. She just wrapped an arm around Emily's shoulder and watched the drawing take shape line by line in the soft amber glow of the falling day. Love, in its purest form, doesn't end. It changes shape, it learns how to echo in other hearts, in other stories. The bond between Emily and Bracken had begun as an accident, a rescue, a moment of courage on a cold morning, but it had become something far greater. It became a reminder that compassion can reach across fear, that empathy can outlast reason, and that sometimes the wildest parts of the world only ask to be seen, not controlled. For Hannah, it changed how she saw everything, her work, her past, even her own reflection in the mirror. She used to think strength meant certainty. Now she understood that real strength often lives inside uncertainty, in the act of showing up with an open heart even when you don't know how things will turn out. The threads of science and spirit that once felt so far apart had begun to weave together. The lab reports and genetic charts told one side of the story. The firelight, the wind, and the unspoken language between her daughter and the bobcat told the other. And somewhere between them lived the truth that connection is older than understanding, and love, the quiet kind, the patient kind, is nature's first language. Every generation leaves behind a bridge away for the next to cross into hope. For some, that bridge is built of stone and steel. For others, it's made of moments, a hand reaching for another, a small act of kindness, a shared glance that says, "I see you." Emily's story became one of those bridges. Schools began writing to the center asking for talks on coexistence, kindness, and environmental stewardship. Families donated feed and blankets. Volunteers from across the county spent weekends mending fences and planting trees. And through it all, Bracken stayed. Not as a captive, but as a teacher, a living reminder that peace is possible between what is human and what is wild. By the end of that first summer, he had begun to slow again, his steps measured but steady. One morning, Hannah found him lying peacefully beneath the same pine where he had once slept after the ceremony. His eyes were closed, his breathing calm. Emily sat beside him for hours, her hand resting gently on his flank. When the sun finally sank, she whispered something Hannah couldn't hear. Then she stood, wiped her tears, and smiled. "He's free now," she said. He stayed long enough to make sure we'd keep listening. That night, the forest seemed to hum, not in grief, but in gratitude. Weeks later, new life returned to the sanctuary. A pair of orphaned bobcat cubs had been brought in after a wildfire. They were fragile, frightened, too young to be alone. Emily named them Ash and Willow, but one she called Ember, the smallest one, the one who slept with her paw pressed against the wire whenever Emily came near. "She remembers him," Emily said softly one evening. "She remembers the light." Hannah smiled. Or maybe she just remembers kindness. But Emily shook her head. Kindness is the light. And maybe that was the truth of it, the real legacy of what had happened in Cedar Hollow. Not the headlines, not the research, but the quiet ripple of good that continued long after the cameras left. We spend so much of our lives trying to leave a mark, something big, visible, lasting. But maybe what matters most are the invisible bridges we leave behind, the moments of tenderness that travel farther than we ever will. The world still tells Emily's story, but the story has changed. It's no longer about a girl who rescued a giant bobcat. It's about how both rescued each other, how they reminded everyone listening that kindness, love, and loyalty are not weaknesses, but the roots that hold this world together. And for the people of Cedar Hollow, it became more than legend. It became a way of living. Sometimes on quiet evenings, Hannah still walks the trail behind the house. She stops by the old pine where the air always feels lighter, as if something sacred lingers there. She doesn't speak. She just listens to the wind, to the earth, to the memory of footsteps that once moved side by side. And when she turns back toward the cabin, she smiles. Because some bridges once built never wash away. If you've ever watched an animal and felt something stir, that wordless connection, that sense of belonging to something bigger, hold on to it. Let it change the way you move through the world. Be softer. Be curious. Be brave enough to care. If this story touched you, take a quiet moment to reflect on your own bridge, the kindness you've given, or the love that found you when you needed it most. And if you believe the world could use a little more gentleness, I invite you to stay connected here, like, subscribe, and share these stories so they can reach another heart that needs them. And if you'd like to help rescue and heal wild animals like bobcats, foxes, and hawks, creatures who remind us what true loyalty and love look like, you can leave a super thanks or donate through the link below. Every bit helps keep these stories and the souls they protect alive. Because in the end, the bridges we build through kindness are the only ones strong enough to last forever.